I am recording this because I keep seeing people say there is no such thing as a curse unless you believe in it, and I used to be one of them. I used to think fear needed your permission to enter. Then, I watched my mother pick up a plastic bag from our doormat, and a damp, sweet smell rose out of it like breath. Inside were candies stuck together with wet soil, and tucked between them was a cutout photo of me, smeared with dirt and something dark that looked too much like dried blood. When I ran to the living room, the frame where that photo belonged was still hanging on the wall, perfectly straight, except it was empty. No broken glass, no scattered nails, just an empty rectangle that made the room feel suddenly unfinished, like the house had forgotten my face. A lot of people will try to turn that into a story about thieves or bored teenagers. I tried too. I tried so hard that I swallowed my own instincts until they burned my throat. In our colonia, politeness is not a habit. It is a rule you learn early, the same way you learn to look both ways before crossing. But some rules have hidden prices, and I learned the worst one when my mother opened the door to a woman who looked at our street like she was reading it. We had lived on that long, straight street since I was born. Houses pressed shoulder to shoulder, low walls, barred windows, narrow patios where people grew potted plants and hung laundry. In the afternoons, kids ran with backpacks bouncing, and the older women talked outside the corner tienda, as if they were anchored there. On our left lived an elderly lady who almost never came out. On our right, a family with too many kids to count, always shouting, always laughing. My father, Hachitur, worked long shifts. My mother, Letitia, kept the house together with routine and quiet authority. My little sister, Sofa, followed her like a shadow. I was the one who watched from windows, because when you grow up in a place where everything repeats, you start noticing the smallest changes. The biggest change was the house across the narrow driveway from ours, the one that had been empty for months. The curtains had sagged like tired eyelids. Dry weeds filled the patio. We all knew the couple who used to live there had left quickly, almost overnight, and nobody agreed on why. People shrugged and said rent got expensive, or they had family problems, or they owed someone money. In our neighborhood, the truth is always a guess passed from mouth to mouth until it becomes something you can live with. One morning, the street sound shifted. I heard scraping, doors banging, furniture dragged across tile. A beat-up van parked outside the empty house, its engine coughing like an old man clearing his throat. A man hauled down bags and a battered table, but my eyes locked on the woman standing at the gate. She did not look around the way newcomers usually do. She did not squint at house numbers or scan for familiar faces. She stared straight down the row of homes, one by one, pausing on each as if she were counting. When her gaze reached my window and found me watching, she did not flinch or look away. She held my eyes for several long seconds, expression calm, as if she had caught something she expected to catch. I stepped back from the window, annoyed at myself for feeling exposed in my own room. A minute later, I peeked again. She was still there, still watching the street, still with that patient, fixed attention that made her seem less like a neighbor and more like a person waiting for a signal. Over the next days, I learned her name because she made sure everyone knew it. Dewey Myrna. She said it with a soft pride, like it came with a title. Her house stayed strangely quiet. No music, no loud television, no visitors laughing in the patio. She brought in very little furniture, but she carried in many large black plastic bags that looked heavy. The kind you tie tight when you do not want anyone to see what is inside. Still, when she stepped outside, she acted like she belonged there already. She waved at the women near the tienda. She smiled at passing kids. She walked up to people and started conversations as if she had been gone for a week, not arrived yesterday. What bothered me was how often her eyes drifted toward our house. Every time my mother opened the door to sweep the front step, Myrna would glance over. If my sister ran outside to throw something away, Myrna would track her movement until she went back in. It was not curiosity the way you look at a new dog on the street. It felt like checking a lock after you have tried it once. One afternoon, my mother asked me to sweep the banquetta in front of our gate. I was pushing dust and leaves into a pile when Myrna approached, slow and deliberate, smiling wide enough to show teeth. Up close, she smelled faintly of herbs and cheap perfume. She asked my name. She asked what grade I was in. She asked how many of us lived in the house. I answered because my mother raised me to answer elders, and because refusing a simple question feels like starting a fight. While I spoke, Myrna leaned slightly, angling her body so she could see past me through the half-open door. Her eyes moved over the hallway, as if memorizing where it led. Later that same day, she knocked to introduce herself properly. My mother opened the door with her usual warmth. Letitia believed good neighbors were like good fences, something you maintained so you did not have to worry later. Myrna stepped into our living room, and I watched her eyes sweep the space with practiced speed. She took in the couch, the family photos, the corridor to the bedrooms. She asked each of our names again, even though she had just asked mine. She asked what my father did for work, what time he came home, what time we left for school. My mother answered in a natural voice, not hearing the alarm in the number of details. When Myrna left, I told my mother it was weird how many questions she asked. My mother brushed it off. New people, she said, always want to know the neighborhood. They want to feel safe. I almost laughed. The only person who looked unsafe in that moment was the person asking for our schedule. The next day, Myrna returned with a small plastic bag in her hand, tied in a neat knot. She said she brought sweets for the children. My mother hesitated, then smiled and accepted them. I saw why she did. In our colonia, refusing a gift can be taken as an insult, and my mother hated being the subject of street talk. She set the bag on the table and told Sophia and me to take a few. The candies were a mix of hard sweets, lollipops, and chocolates. Some wrappers were wrinkled, as if they had been warmed and cooled again. Some were sealed poorly. A few had no clear brand, just shiny plastic with faded printing. Sophia grabbed the most colorful ones with both hands. I took a chocolate and a hard candy with a flavor I could not place. It was not exactly bad, but it tasted wrong, like sweetness hiding something bitter underneath. I swallowed anyway because my mother was watching, because Myrna was watching, and because I did not want to make a scene over a piece of candy. A couple of hours later, my stomach began to twist. At first, I thought it was hunger or nerves, but the pain tightened until it stole my breath. I ran to the bathroom, then ran again. Heat climbed up my face. My legs shook. Sophie sat on the floor holding her belly and whining in a thin voice that scared me more than her crying ever had. My mother touched my forehead, and her expression changed. She touched my sister next and went pale. Within minutes, she was pulling shoes on our feet and leading us to the small clinic down the street. The doctor asked what we ate. My mother listed breakfast, lunch, everything she could remember. When she mentioned the candies from the new neighbor, the doctor frowned. He said it could be an intoxication from something contaminated, or candy made in poor hygiene, or candy stored badly. He gave us rehydration salts, pills for stomach cramps, and told us to rest. On the walk home, the sun felt too bright, and the street looked slightly tilted, like I was walking through a picture instead of real space. The first thing I saw when we reached our gate was Myrna across the street, standing near her doorway, watching us return. That night, I lay in bed with my stomach still cramping and tried to be reasonable. Maybe the candies were old. Maybe we picked up something at school. Maybe it was coincidence, but coincidence has a different weight when it lands the same way. And the moment I closed my eyes, I saw Myrna holding that bag out like she was placing it into our hands on purpose. A sentence formed in my head with a clarity that did not feel like my own thought. Some doors swing on politeness, not hinges. I hated that it sounded dramatic, and I hated more that it felt true. By the next day, I was a little better, weak but upright. Sophia still looked sick. Around midday, someone knocked. My mother opened the door, and Myrna stepped forward with that same wide smile, her eyes sharp and curious. She asked how we were feeling, if the medicine worked, if our stomachs still hurt. She sounded almost excited, like someone checking if a recipe turned out the way they expected. My mother told her the doctor said it was probably something we ate. Myrna asked, casually, if my mother thought it was the candy. My mother said she did not know, but she also said we were not going to eat any more of it. I watched Myrna's eyes flick to me at that exact moment. Her smile did not disappear, but it hardened, like the skin on fruit when it begins to dry. Myrna shrugged and said she always gave candy to children wherever she lived, and nothing ever happened. She said people like to invent things. Then she added something that made my neck prickle. She said in her last neighborhood, people blamed her for strange illnesses after she shared food. But it was all lies. She said it like a story she had practiced, like a defense she kept folded in her pocket. Instead of calming me, it made my fear take shape. If the same accusation follows you from place to place, It stops being bad luck and starts being your shadow. After that first sickness, my parents argued softly at the kitchen table. My mother clung to the idea of coincidence. My father said he did not like how Myrna pushed her way into our home so quickly. I listened without speaking, because I did not have proof. Only the memory of pain and the taste of that bitter candy. That night, as I was drifting into sleep, I heard the faintest plastic rustle outside, like a bag being set down gently. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The street was quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the ordinary hum of distant traffic, and somewhere close, a brief scrape as if something brushed our gate. In the morning, there was nothing outside, and I told myself I imagined it. I wanted to believe imagination was the worst enemy we had. I did not understand yet that imagination is only terrifying when it matches reality a little too well. Myrna did not stop coming. She returned with another bag of sweets a few days later, and this time she also carried a paper bag of bread. She said she baked it herself as a kind gesture because we had been sick. My mother tried to refuse, but Myrna pushed the bags forward with a steady insistence that made refusing feel like refusing a handshake. My mother accepted them and set them on the counter, eyes tired, shoulders tight. I stared at the bread. It smelled good, but the crust was oddly hard in places, and the color was uneven, like it had been cooked too fast. My father took a slice that evening, chewing slowly with the cautious expression of a man tasting something he does not trust. He said it tasted strange, not spoiled, just strange. That night, he woke up complaining of burning on his arms and chest. When my mother turned on the light, red welts covered his skin in angry patches. He looked like he had dragged himself through thorny bushes. He ran a fever and spent the rest of the night shifting in bed, groaning, scratching until his nails left pale lines. Watching my father, strong and stubborn, reduced to discomfort by something as simple as bread, made my anger flare into something sharper. I wanted to go across the street and throw the bags back at Myrna's gate. I wanted to tell her to stay away from us, but my mother kept saying we did not know for sure, and my father, despite his suspicion, did not want trouble with the neighbors. In our colonia, trouble spreads faster than gossip, and gossip spreads like smoke. A few days later, Myrna arrived with fruit. Apples and bananas, she said, bought on sale, shared from the goodness of her heart. My mother's mouth tightened. She tried to decline, but Myrna held the bag out until it hovered between them like a test. My mother took it with stiff fingers and shut the door quickly afterward. Sophia, curious and careless, bit into half an apple before anyone could stop her. That night, she started scratching her neck and arms until her skin reddened. She cried, complaining that it burned and itched. My mother gave her allergy medicine, rubbing lotion into her arms while whispering soothing words that sounded more like prayers than comfort. By then, the pattern was too clean to ignore. Candy, sickness, bread, rash, fruit, hives. Each gift carried a new harm, different enough to seem accidental, similar enough to feel planned. It was like someone changing tools while keeping the same intention. I began to flinch whenever I saw Myrna step out of her house, holding a bag. I also began to watch her house more closely. From my window, I noticed people coming to her gate at odd hours. They were not neighbors. They moved quickly, heads down, carrying bags that looked heavy. They entered, stayed a short time, then left without lingering or greeting anyone on the street. Myrna did not spend time chatting with the families, who sat outside in the evening, the way normal neighbors did. She focused on certain households, the ones with a sick relative, the ones with money problems, the ones whose couples fought. She spoke to them longer, leaning in, hands moving as if she were explaining something private. At the tienda, I heard whispers. A woman said Myrna did trabajos. Another said she charged people to cause illness or separation. Someone laughed nervously and said it was nonsense, but nobody laughed too hard. In places like ours, folklore lives alongside logic, and people keep a small space in their minds for things they pretend not to believe. Then Myrna brought something new, a bag of dried herbs, brittle and brown, smelling bitter even through plastic. She told my mother they were good for relaxation, that she could make tea at night for better sleep. Especially for me. She called me muchacho, like she had the right to. My mother tried to refuse, but Myrna pressed her advantage, speaking gently about stress and school. and how thin I looked. My mother's resistance softened under the familiar pressure of wanting to be polite and wanting to believe in harmless solutions. She took the herbs. That night after dinner, my mother brewed the tea. The liquid was dark and smelled like damp leaves. She handed me a cup and told me to drink it hot so I could rest. The first sip tasted like bitterness, trying to disguise itself as medicine. I drank anyway, because refusing would mean admitting my mother made a mistake, and I could see in her face she was clinging to the hope that this time, Myrna's gift would be safe. I went to bed with that bitter warmth sitting heavy in my stomach. Sleep came fast and wrong, like falling through a trapdoor. In the dream, my room looked exactly as it did in real life, down to the way my closet door never fully closed, and the faint glow from the hallway when the living room light was off. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, aware of my breathing, aware of the weight of the blanket. I tried to move my arm and could not. Panic rose as calmly as water filling a sink. My chest felt pressed down, not by the blanket but by something unseen with purpose. My eyes drifted toward the doorway, and there she was. Myrna stood in the frame, head tilted slightly, hands hanging at her sides, her face unreadable. She did not speak. She did not step closer. She simply watched, unblinking, as if my struggle entertained her. I wanted to shout for my mother. I wanted to throw myself off the bed. My body refused every command. The only thing that moved was my fear, swelling until it filled my throat. When I finally managed a harsh breath, I jerked awake, soaked in sweat. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. The room was dark. The doorway was empty. But the door was cracked open, the same amount it had been in the dream, even though I was sure I had closed it before sleeping. My skin crawled with the certainty that the dream had not stayed inside my head. The next morning, my mother told me sleep paralysis was common. She said stress could do strange things. My father listened and did not argue, but his eyes lingered on the herbs sitting on the counter, and he threw them away with a quick, angry motion that surprised even him. He told my mother we were done accepting gifts. My mother agreed, relief and guilt mixing in her expression, as if she was relieved to stop and guilty to admit she should have stopped sooner. When Myrna knocked again, my mother opened the door, only a crack. She told Myrna politely but firmly that we were not accepting any more gifts. Myrna's smile faltered for the first time. She asked if my mother also thought she was responsible for what was happening. My mother said it was just a family decision. Myrna's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned away without her usual warmth, walking back to her house with shoulders stiff, as if carrying an insult. After that, she stopped trying to enter, but she began to pass in front of our house more often, slow enough to be obvious. Sometimes I would catch her standing farther down the street, facing our direction, still as a statue. She never waved. She never spoke. Her silence felt like a threat that did not need words. A few days into that new tension, we noticed a thin layer of powder clinging to our doorframe, like ash or very fine dirt. It traced a faint line along the wood. My mother wiped it off, frowning, saying maybe it blew in from the street. The next morning, it was there again, in almost the same place. My father rubbed it between his fingers and sniffed it. He did not say what it smelled like, but his face tightened, and he washed his hands longer than usual. I started waking at night with that heavy pressure on my chest. Sometimes I saw a shape near the window, always in the same corner of my vision, a body standing still. I could never make out a face. The moment I managed to move, the shape was gone. These episodes happened more often, and they stole my appetite during the day. I lost weight. My mother said my skin looked pale. At school, my attention drifted, and loud sounds made me jump. My friends asked if I was okay, and I lied because telling the truth would make it real in a way I could not handle. Then the strange signs moved outside the bedroom. One afternoon, my mother opened the front door to take out trash, and found a plastic bag placed near the step. She did not touch it immediately. By then, fear had trained her hands. She called my father, and he came with scissors. He cut the bag open carefully on the kitchen floor. Inside were candies again, and stuck to the plastic was damp soil that smelled like rain and something older. Buried among the candy was a ribbon. I recognized it instantly, a thin strip of fabric I kept in a small box in my room. A silly keepsake I never expected anyone else to know existed. Seeing it sitting in our kitchen among dirty candy made my stomach lurch harder than any illness. It was like looking at proof that the walls of my home had become optional. My mother rushed to my room, checking the box. The lid sat slightly crooked. Nothing else was missing. That should have comforted me. Instead, it convinced me someone could take what they wanted and leave no trace. My mother threw the bag away far from our house, walking it to the trash bins near the corner tienda. As if distance could break whatever connection it carried, my father installed extra locks. He checked windows twice each night. Sofa stopped asking why. She stopped eating candy from anyone. The normal rhythm of our home tightened into a constant readiness, like we were waiting for a knock we could not ignore. It did not stay limited to us. A boy from the neighborhood, younger than me, always outside kicking a ball, accepted candy from Myrna one day. She handed it to him with a smile in full view of the street, like she wanted witnesses. A few hours later, he began vomiting and complaining of dizziness. His parents rushed him to the hospital. By evening, everyone knew he was in serious condition from suspected poisoning. That news spread like wildfire. It changed the way people said Myrna's name. The word Bruja began to follow it openly, not just in whispers. My father decided we would not open the door for her again, not even to argue. When Myrna knocked after the boy was hospitalized, my mother did not open the door. She spoke through it, voice shaking, telling Myrna to leave us alone. Myrna did not yell. She did not plead. She simply stood outside long enough that we could feel her presence through the wood, then walked away. That night, my mother asked me to take out the trash before bed. I opened the door, stepped onto the mat, and felt something under my foot. My skin went cold. I lifted my shoe and saw a plastic bag pressed flat on the mat, tied in a knot. I did not pick it up. I backed into the house and called my father. He came jaw clenched and carried the bag to the kitchen using another bag like a glove. He cut it open. Candy spilled out, mixed with wet soil. The smell hit my nose, sweet and rotten at the same time. My father pulled out a folded piece of paper from inside, and when he opened it, my breath stopped. It was my photo, cut out, smeared with dirt and dried blood. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her, half gasp, half sob. I ran to the living room wall. The frame that held our family photo hung there like always, but my section was gone. The frame was empty where my face should have been. It looked like someone had erased me from the house. My father stared at the empty frame, then at the photo in his hand, as if he was seeing something he had refused to imagine. My mother did not keep that bag in the house for even a minute longer. She double-bagged it and carried it out to the corner trash bins again, walking fast, shoulders hunched, as if she felt eyes on her back. My father followed and threw the photo away too. I wanted to retrieve it. Not because I wanted it back, but because throwing it away felt like letting someone keep a part of me. I did not move. Fear glued me to the kitchen floor. That night, I slept in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty frame. I saw Myrna's face in the doorway of my dream. I heard the faint crinkle of plastic. I realized something that made my stomach twist worse than illness. A picture is supposed to remember you, not mark you. And my picture had become a mark. Within days, my health collapsed. Fever climbed and refused to drop. My head throbbed. My limbs tingled, then went numb in patches, as if my nerves were forgetting their jobs. Sitting up felt like lifting a weight tied to my spine. The doctor said it could be viral, stress, dehydration. He gave more medicine. My mother stayed awake at night, listening to my breathing, checking my forehead. She looked smaller each day, like fear was consuming her from the inside. Outside, the neighborhood reached a breaking point. People traded stories at the tienda and in doorways. Someone said their marriage turned toxic after Myrna helped. Someone said their child got sick after eating her sweets. Someone said they saw strangers coming and going from her house with bags late at night. The stories piled until they formed a shape everyone could see. The word Bruja stopped being an insult and became an accusation. One late afternoon, when the sun was lowering and the street shadows grew longer, I heard shouting, not the usual street noise but a chorus of angry voices. I forced myself out of bed and stumbled to the window. A group of neighbors crowded in front of Myrna's gate. Some held sticks, some held kitchen knives. They slammed the metal with fists and wood, shouting for her to leave. The sound traveled through the whole street like a warning bell. My father went outside, not to join them, but to stand on our banqueta and watch. My mother stayed inside with Sophia. one hand on my shoulder, as if anchoring herself. The neighbors yelled that they were tired of sickness, tired of fear, tired of waking up wondering who would be next. They called Myrna a bruja again and again until the word lost meaning and became pure sound. Myrna's door swung open. She stepped out, and the friendliness she had worn like a mask was gone. Her face was tight with anger. She shouted that everyone was crazy, that she only tried to help, that people got sick because they were dirty and careless. She denied everything, even as the crowd shouted back about the bags, the powder on door frames, the photo, the poison boy. The gate shook as people pushed. The air seemed to thicken, loaded with sweat and rage. For a moment, I thought they would break through and drag her out. Part of me wanted that. Another part was terrified of what would happen if they crossed that line. Violence has its own consequences, and I could already feel our street trembling with the weight of what it was about to do. Sirens cut through the shouting. Police cars rolled up, lights flashing against house walls. Officers stepped between Myrna and the crowd, ordering people back. They spoke firmly, trying to calm the storm. Some neighbors argued with them, pointing at Myrna's house, begging them to do something. The police approached Myrna, speaking to her at the doorway. I could not hear the words, only the tone, sharp and official. After a tense stretch of minutes, Myrna disappeared inside and returned carrying a small bundle of belongings, as if she had expected this day. She walked quickly toward a car, escorted by officers. The crowd still shouted, but the sound was less sure now, drained by the arrival of authority. Myrna did not look at them. She did not spit curses. She did not cry. Right before she got into the car, she turned her head and looked straight at our house. Not at the street, not at the crowd, not at the police. At us, at our door. Her eyes held mine for a brief, clean moment, and the expression on her face was not anger. It was something colder, like acknowledgement, like she was reminding me she had seen me first. Then, she got into the car and left, escorted down the street, until the lights vanished around the corner. The crowd dispersed slowly, people muttering, some relieved, some still shaking with adrenaline. When the street quieted again, it felt wrong, like the pause after a scream. The days that followed did not snap back to normal, but they shifted. My fever eased. The numbness in my limbs retreated. The heavy pressure in my sleep faded until I could lie down without bracing for a nightmare. Sophia stopped itching. My father's skin cleared. No more bags appeared on our doorstep. No more powder clung to the doorframe. The boy who had been in the hospital began to improve. The house Myrna lived in sat empty again, curtains drooping, gate locked, as if nothing had ever happened there. People in the neighborhood avoided walking too close to that house for a long time. Some said it was cursed now. Some said it was just fear lingering. Either way, nobody wanted to rent it. When I passed it on my way to the tienda, I felt my stomach tighten, remembering the smell of wet soil in our kitchen. I told myself the danger had been removed. I tried to believe the story ended with her leaving, but endings are not always clean. They leave residue. Months later, on an ordinary afternoon, I was at the corner tienda buying a soda. A woman in line beheld a small bag of candy for her child. The smell of sugar rose, and my hands started sweating. The woman smiled at her kid and said, "Take one. It is fine." My throat tightened. I wanted to grab the bag and throw it in the trash. I wanted to tell her to never take candy from strangers, to never accept anything you did not choose yourself. But my mother's old rule burned in my mind: do not embarrass people in public. Politeness again, trying to control my mouth. I walked home with the soda cold in my hand and fear hot under my skin. When I reached our gate, I saw something on the doormat. A single candy, wrapper wrinkled, stuck to the fibers as if pressed there with a damp thumb. No bag this time, just one piece, like a punctuation mark. I froze in the doorway, listening. The street was quiet. No footsteps, no voices. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows on the pavement, and the air smelled like dust and warm concrete. I stared at that candy until my eyes watered, because my brain was trying to force logic into place. A kid could have dropped it. The wind could have pushed it. It could be nothing. Then, from inside our house, from the dark hallway behind me where my bedroom door used to hang half open, a voice whispered, soft enough to make me doubt my hearing, familiar enough to make my blood go cold. "You only have to say yes once."